Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to host our last installment for Infrastructure Masons IMWomen 2025 Gender Parity Challenge. This past year, we've been doing a variety of podcasts, panelists, white papers, and other type of media to really reach out to the industry and help support learning and development around diversity, inclusion, and equity throughout our industry. Today, I'm hosting a panel with a handful of industry luminaries, thought leaders, and real influencers around the importance of allyship and advocacy. So let's kick in. I'm delighted to have this conversation with a handful of, as I mentioned, our thought leaders and influencers. As chair for IMWomen, I'm so grateful for all of the work that our committee has done throughout this past year. And our goal is to reach parity by 2025. IMWomen has been driving the industry and bringing awareness, education to increase recruitment and advancement of women in the digital age. Today, I will host a conversation with Chris, Eanna, Adam, Lee, and Darin, who will all share with us their perspectives on the importance of allyship and advocacy for our industry. These industry influencers have taken action to support gender parity, and while we're here, we will hear from their personal and professional journeys towards allyship and advocacy. Many people might wonder, why am I hosting a panel of all men on this topic? Well, we thoughtfully curated this panel because each man here, each person here has become an industry leader. They understand how important it is to develop a workforce that is representative, and they are willing to share with us some of the lessons they've learned throughout their careers. As I've often said, change does not happen on the shoulders of those who are marginalized. It happens when people who are in power stand up for those who don't. These men have stepped forward to share and support gender parity in our industry, and I could not be more appreciative they are willing to bring that importance to the discussion today. We will join the conversation on three main themes. These themes are the importance of gender parity, creating a culture of diversity and inclusion, and what actions they've taken so we can all learn from their own experiences. Let's first take a look at where we are. This is a representation of women by level throughout a sponsored survey that Lean In and McKinsey recently committed to. In our own industry, we also have a reported disparity. The 2020 Uptime Institute completed a report from participating firms. 75% of those firms reported that they had less than 20% women in their design, build, or operations staff. And a staggering 25% had no women in their organization. So despite multiple studies that gender parity adds to financial returns, delivers more innovation, and creates better working cultures, we have a ways to go. So in order to help all of us determine how to create a better culture for advocacy and allyship, I will ask our great panelists today to add some of their experiences. And Chris, what I'd love to hear from you first is, what do you think people can do to become a better ally to women and underrepresented minority groups?
Well, I think it's very simple. I think you have to be an advocate. You have to be an advocate for diversity. And diversity at Compass means many things. It means diversity of personality. We don't want people with all the same personality types on the same teams. It means gender diversity. It means race diversity. It means background diversity, what countries that you're from, how, what background, what elements that you're bringing to the table with different lenses and different worldviews. When you take a group of people that are aligned with a culture of a company and a vision of a company, and they come from highly diverse backgrounds, that's the way to get the best. The worst situation you can have is groupthink. A team of Chris Crosby's is a dumpster fire of a company. That is not a good place to be.
Thanks, Chris. Adam, I'm curious about your own perspective when it comes to allyship and advocacy. Have you seen a diverse environment positively affect your company?
Oh, I definitely, for sure, Heather. And I love what Chris called it, a dumpster fire if it was all Chris Crosby's. It would be a dumpster fire if it was all Adam Rogers's as well. I think where I've really seen the value at, and it took me a while to understand this, and that was I have blind spots. And if I don't see those blind spots unless I have someone that has a different point of view. And that's really where the value that I've experienced of having a diverse workforce that's diverse in gender, diverse in background, diverse in race. And that's really how we move Hensel Phelps forward. So the big transition that I've seen in my 25 years here is when I started, we pretty much looked the same. We came from similar backgrounds and we weren't growing. And then as we made a commitment to become more diverse, our organization has taken off, and we're continuing to put a lot of effort into. You had a graph up earlier, and the entry level folks, we're getting closer with parity there. But as we move to more middle management and senior management, that's where we're having some challenges at. And so, the more that we can do as an organization for advocacy, the more educated we can be, the more change we can make inside of our organization. And our real goal is to look like the communities that we build our work in.
Yeah, we call that a representative workforce, and I couldn't agree more. And many companies see the same challenges, and obviously we just saw that in the graph a minute ago, right? Where at the entry level, you've got a higher level of potential parity, but as women increase in their responsibilities, we call it a leaking pipeline, because at the senior most level, we don't see the same degree of parity, and in fact, the numbers drastically drop as women become more responsible and have senior level roles in companies. I'm curious if anyone else has any other experience similar to that, and possibly any stories to share of how do you get more parity at that middle management level.
I think it helps having a helping hand, a mentor. We've got a very strong mentorship program that has senior people adopt younger people that are coming up through the organization, give them tips, give them feedback, meet with them regularly, and coach them on what their career could look like if they want to go down this path. And having a mentor on your side as decisions are being made and project teams are being formed is always a great thing. I know I've benefited from mentors in my career, so we've tried to enforce that at Salute.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thanks, Lee. And does anyone have kind of an opinion about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship? Because they are two distinct actions and they have different outcomes. Chris, I know that you've been a sponsor for a handful of women that I'm familiar with. Tell me a little bit more about your experience there.
Well, I think, when you're aware and you're able to look at the biases that do occur, the biases go both ways, right? So you have a lot of men that have bravado and they think more of themselves than what they would otherwise be capable of, and they'll put themselves up for promotions and they'll advocate on their own behalf. And this is 80-20 rules, right? So it's not everyone, not every scenario. You also have the alternative scenario in which you have a lot of females that maybe are like, well, maybe I'm not fully qualified to be in this position, and as a result of that, they won't promote themselves into those environments. You have to be very aware of that as an executive, and you have to forcibly go out and ask those questions. Why don't you feel like you're qualified? No one's qualified the first time they're in a management role. Frankly, most of us still aren't qualified for the roles that we're in, right? So I think it's really important to be actually to look at things for what they are and be okay with it. It's okay. Just ask the questions, bring it up. And a lot of times you can find candidates, you can find people that have incredible talents and they just haven't had the opportunity because maybe they didn't ask about the opportunity, or they felt like they had to be at 100% capable, as opposed to most men with the egos that we have, you know, in the general sense, right? Oh, I don't care, you know, I'll go for that role.
Yeah, there's a statistic around that, right? For job descriptions, and this is really important, because women often will not apply for a job unless they tick 100% of the box, whereas men, it's much less, right? So they're much more willing to kind of self-advocate and take a bit of a risk, and so, you know, one of the things that we look towards is male leaders such as all of yourselves, to help support and sponsor women. And I'd love to hear your perspective on sponsorship. I know that that's something that, you know, you have advocated for in your career.
Yeah, absolutely, Heather. And I think the discussion and the around mentorship versus sponsorship is something that I'm passionate about. I've been very fortunate, as Chris shared. You know, we've all had mentors in our career, and Lee, we've had mentors that have helped us. We've had sponsors, we've had support. And for me, firsthand, when I was climbing through the ranks, I guess, having those mentors, having those sponsors, having that support from family, from friends was extremely important. And I look at this slide and this discussion around advocacy and what are we doing. It's the action we're taking to support underrepresented minorities, women in the gender parity challenge, and really, as I went to start Yonder Americas here, the focus was based on how can we do it differently. The industry isn't changing, and that's why we signed up to the Gender Parity Challenge quite early. And so for me, it was getting feedback from outside of the data center industry, peers and friends in other industries, academia. The partnership we did with Brad Johnson and David Smith, the writers of Tina Rising and Good Guys, that was early wins for us to learn and learn different ways and different ways people are thinking about it, different industries are thinking about it, that will ultimately benefit us long term.
Thank you so much. You know, sponsorship is taking a risk on someone. Mentorship is helping someone with career advice and you know, making sure that they've got a plan in place. But sponsorship is actually opening the door for someone and making sure that you've got their back, no matter you know, their success is part of your success, but you're willing to take a risk on them. And so, you know, I think that it's important to make a determination when you enter into a relationship at the professional level. Are you in a sponsorship position, or are you in a mentorship position? Both are extremely important.
Yeah, Heather, I'd like to add into that, because my staff grapples with that quite a bit. You know, the consensus is we have plenty of mentors, and you know, that's not widely talked about, et cetera. But what the women on the team have particularly emphasized, we need more sponsors. We need managers who are willing to put DE&I goals into their responsibilities, and then and also, I think Chris mentioned it, understanding their own biases. That's how the momentum starts. Sponsors really provide an active and a consistent support mechanism that helps develop their staff, that aligns with the business objectives. That's how it works.
I love it. Thank you so much. I'm going to move on to the importance of culture. You know, and when you look at, you know, the statistics out there, companies who have gender diversity outperform their competition. And also, you know, employees who think that their organization is committed to supporting diversity, they actually feel included, and their ability to innovate increases by 83%. Now, that's an incredible statistic. And I know in this industry how important innovation is. So what I'd like to know is, you know, when you're thinking about hiring talent and promoting inclusion within your organization, What steps do you take? Darin, any thoughts?
Well, I look back the last 10 years of building a program from one person into several hundred. And I guess what I always looked for was behavior. It was a mindset and behavior. And here's the challenge we face. We're in an industry where A-type professionals, we thrive in this. Decisions are made quickly, succinctly. Leaders are rewarded for it. But it just works against harvesting the best ideas from a diverse team. And so I'm not looking for the loudest person out there. I'm looking for people who get it, who know how to harvest the talent that they have. And I think we as leaders need to model that behavior of what we want to get out of this industry. We can hire in a diverse talent, but unless we harvest what they offer, it's not effective. So there's a couple of thoughts that I have on how we as leaders can model that behavior. It's a simple, which is intentionally listening more than talking. Many of my colleagues on this broadcast, I think we all struggle with that to a degree. But it's really using that quiet time to seek out those that are traditionally less vocal, and look for facial cues, look for ways to encourage that involvement afterwards. That's how you attract more of a diverse workforce. Let's take communication styles as well. This is really key. An example. I asked my Singapore team, what can headquarters stop doing to help them? And here was the response. It was, please stop talking every time a gap of silence occurs. We need that time to formulate our thoughts and translate what you said. So just be okay with 4 to 5 seconds of silence after you ask a question. Boom, imagine if you're trying to recruit talent from overseas and you're aware and you apply this. I mean, that's how it works.
I love the active inquiry, asking, right? Yeah. And then listening. Yeah. Any other personal stories related to creating value through an inclusive workforce? Chris?
Look, I think when you commit to being a diverse company, you're committing to differences, and that's hard. And the culture is incredibly important in order to get through that. You have to have language and ability to get through things. Darin mentioned, giving space. Different personality types. Some personality types don't talk. The aggressive ones do talk all the time. Well, if you're running meetings and you're not aware of that, you don't know the personality types on your team, you're only going to hear the same opinions all the time, and that's a danger. If you bring in different types, different cultures, backgrounds, things like that, you have to have a vehicle for people to be able to express when they've been offended, when they feel like they've been misunderstood, if they feel like they're under attack, or did they do something wrong, are they in trouble? I love Brene Brown on this, where she uses the story that I'm telling myself. The story I'm telling myself is that you were really mad at me when you said that. Is what's the real story? And that takes the humility to actually say, I could be wrong. But in a diverse organization, you're wrong most of the time of what you think that other person said. And that is incredibly important, that the company has the right tools that are part of its culture day in and day out to be able to quickly shorten those gaps. Because the worst thing that can happen in a diverse culture is to have very long accounts where you have, oh my gosh, this person, and they did this on this date, and this on that date, and this on this date, and this on this date. Well, when you're dealing with diverse culture, you've got to have a way to shorten those accounts. It's very important in any company for success.
You don't want to isolate the talent that you worked so hard to bring in, right? You want to hear all of the voices around the table, because that's when you get the best ideas. Adam, I'd love to hear a little bit more from you on this particular topic.
Thanks, Heather. I'm going back to that slide, because really for us, that the attraction and the hiring, we've got a process, and that's working, but how do we retain these folks? And I really wanted this diverse people, and I wanted to give a story of really ties into what Darin and Chris were talking about giving people a voice, of the ability to communicate, particularly, hey, this is a story that I'm telling myself. And so we had a construction project, and it was a really tough job, tough client, very diverse workforce. And we brought in a facilitator where they did a personality test. It's really simple. It's 4 colors. It's called colors. And the beauty of it is people get an opportunity to get to know themselves, the high level stuff. This is not deep. But more importantly, when you figure out that you're an orange or a gold or a green or a blue, how do you interact with the other colors? And so the staff enjoyed it so much that they put those colored stickers on their hard hat. And what we found is that they had the ability to talk to each other. Alina, I know that you're an orange, and I really want to talk the details. I need some help. And then that helped Alina understand that she was dealing with someone in a different way. And it kind of became a fun way for the team to connect, not just to see the differences, but to really understand the similarities amongst everybody.
Yeah. I think that we sometimes need extra tools, and something to kind of break the ice, to find the humanity across the organizations that we work in. And so, I encourage folks to think about a variety of different ice-breaking techniques and ways for people to find their voice and find comfort in sharing their ideas in a corporate environment. Lee, I haven't heard from you for a bit, and I'd love to get your perspective on creating a culture of advocacy and allyship.
I look at it as a business advantage, and I think a lot of people on this call do too, that if you can create that culture of diversity and allyship, then you've got a stronger organization as a whole. We at Salute have grown at a crazy rate for 8 years, and I don't think we could have done it if, like Chris said, they all were me. So we've had a very strong, diverse workforce that has come up, and we've come up with new ways of doing things, new ways of expanding. Everything about innovation in our space, though we do hands-on work, there's better ways to do it than we were doing it 2 years ago. And we figured that out by having this kind of transparent culture where people can communicate effectively and have respect for each other. So I think that when you're trying to get people to become allies and advocates for gender equality, that the way you can get to them is show them the business results, the McKinsey reports that are coming out showing that conclusively you are a better business if you can promote this kind of culture. The danger is, and I don't know how to say this without sounding dark, is there's a lot of large corporations that seem to take a defensive posture around DE&I, and it's not an offensive posture trying to drive results, but trying to protect the company. And that's what I think that we need to, as a whole, as people across the industry are working together, to realize when that happens and how they can back off from that and not be in that kind of role of just putting someone in a token position and talking to it, building a bunch of policies, and not actually seeing the behavior in senior management all the way down to the technicians. That was a whole bunch.
That is, I love the input, Lee. Thank you so much. You spoke to tokenism, and Chris, I think you have an opinion on this that you wanted to share.
Look, I mean, it's hard to understand tokenism. I guess I was blessed in that I was a Reagan kid that was grew up with Stranger Things in the suburbs type of thing. So just didn't experience any of this. And one of the things we haven't mentioned is the age bias that goes on. And you've got boomers and you got Gen Xers like myself, and then you got millennials and Gen Z, and that's also a really interesting thing, because what I found is on diversity is women who have been fighting in and I use the word fighting in construction and the world of IT for decades. Okay. But then the younger generation, they don't know that has to even exist. And so the beauty of not having to come in with that and giving them opportunities on things in an environment that there are so many opportunities that you can provide within those areas. And on the sponsorship side, you've got to be willing to say, hey, wow, these people have been fighting this in the world of construction for all these years. How would it feel to get an opportunity that you wouldn't have otherwise had? What you just talking to them about it. Hey, why have you been passed over so many times? I'm confused. What's happened? Giving them the ability to say what's occurred is something that is very valuable to an organization, and it creates when people get to see that, and then that provides the next example and the next, shining star on the hill for others. And so it feeds on itself. It really does. Tokenism, that's the worst form of anything. I mean, that is awful. If you're out there ticking boxes, I don't care. We see it on the sustainability side. We see it on the diversity side. That's just the lowest form of humanity, I think, in my opinion, when you're ticking boxes to get somewhere else.
Thanks, Chris. Often, diversity and inclusion and equity work ends up being disproportionately on the shoulders of those who are already marginalized. And so important to hear from all of you and to listen to your stories and your experiences on how you create a more active culture around inclusion, diversity, allyship, and advocacy. I want to move us forward into some of the actions that you folks have taken throughout your career. Maybe you could help me and help our listeners today understand a little bit more about some of the real life tools that you've used to advocate and recommend for gender parity in your teams and your groups. Eanna, I haven't heard from you for a bit.
Yeah, sure thing. And I think, that's a critical graph you showed early on as the progression, and something that resonated with me starting the Americas business here was to begin hiring. You can create a pretty solid pipeline of candidates, but once you get them into the business, how do you help them progress? And for us, there was a deep focus on people and professional development. So recruiting the candidate actually became almost the easiest part of the process. Retention, professional development, advocacy, and support was a lot more challenging, and is a lot more challenging. And so there was definitely, it starts from the top. And so leadership, and I was proud to support the initiatives and set the tone, and will continue to do so. But we also had to implement specific policies, manager training. Managers in our industry were used to managing people like themselves for the last 20, 30, 40 years. And so when you change that, and you change the dynamic of the team that managers are used to managing, that created a lot of challenges. And we had to invest in new people management training tools. We had to invest in processes and systems that created awareness. We had to invest in professional development for our teams to demonstrate that you were going to feel uncomfortable working in a different environment. That's okay. And this is what you do, and here are some things and learnings that you do when you see that happening. So while I agree that yes, leadership sets the tone, it does require evaluating the entire stack, and particularly for us, really the focus over the past 12 months has been the people managers.
That's great input. Darin, any other real life tools and examples that you can share with our listeners?
Sure, and something that both Adam and Chris mentioned earlier regarding the construction industry, and I'm focusing there not only because it's my expertise, but it's prohibiting the growth, the natural growth of our data center industry right now, and that is it's really the construction space, nationally speaking, is really a generally non-inclusive environment. And as far as tools go, I want to share some ideas that have really started to gain traction with some of our partners. And it starts with it starts with a major move on as far as owners go. It's selecting like-minded general contractors. Not only should you be looking for best qualified builders, this, that, and the other, price, schedule, et cetera, but what's the culture of that business? Most of the companies that are here, iMasons members, we're building for the next decade. We're going strong, and we're bringing partners on these rides with us that are multiple years. That engagement is very different than what we've had in the past, and it allows for progress as partners to occur. So some ideas. It starts small, something like stocking the portable toilets with sanitary supplies. It grows to more mature strategies like funding a qualified DE&I officer on these multi-year projects to promote a clear message and monitor those behaviors. This is not a one and done thing. I've seen playbooks being produced jointly between an owner and a general contractor that it really clarifies the stance on gender equity, bias motivated events, and it can be included in all the onboarding. Everybody that steps foot on that project understands your stance, and then periodically re-educate, because really this is a major cultural shift in our industry. So those are my thoughts.
I think it's a really important part of the journey to creating a more diverse and equitable workforce is to remember that this is a really robust ecosystem across this industry. And it's not just us as owners, right, or companies' missions. It's actually across the entire ecosystem and the partners and the suppliers and the manufacturers. And so you really bring up a super important part of the conversation that I don't think we really spend a lot of time in. So thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate it, Darin. Some other ideas, Lee? Real life tools or examples?
What we found is work effectively is as we go through the interview process and we are onboarding is everybody does go through cultural indoctrination. They understand the values and the beliefs of the company and why we are doing what we're doing. And we get them to buy into it. And that can also be a weeding out, which is not a bad thing either. If they don't embrace those values of the company and drive forward with what you're trying to do from a visionary point of view, you're going to have a disparate culture, but that's really bonded us together. And then we also have the mechanics of a strong HR team that makes sure that there is no wage disparity and goes through and finds the information and is able to report that to senior management without any fear or concern of retribution, because they're going to take that and act on it and make it right. That's a little harder in larger companies, but I know that wage disparity has been one of the outcomes of this whole thing, and having a good, strong advocate from the top down gives your HR department the fuel they need to be able to make sure that things are being kept on level keel.
Great point. Chris?
Yeah, look, I think it's more than set the tone from a leadership perspective. I mean, say what you want. We have all female construction managers on every job site in the U.S., right? I mean, that's something we're very proud of for what it gives our business. We're able to bring in people that have no experience that say, hey, I want to be in construction. We have tools and processes and things that allow them to be incredibly valuable to the business. What are we benefiting from? Well, we're benefiting from the general 80-20 that women are more observant than men in those types of situations. And so it's hugely valuable to the business. Like, why would we not want that? You've got to dictate things. Sorry, I know you think that this is a great candidate, but I'm looking at all the personality types in your or I'm looking at all these age groups that you're hiring, or I'm looking at the genders that you're hiring, or the backgrounds that you're hiring. Like, sorry, your next hire doesn't get to be that. I think you have to do that from the top. It doesn't change otherwise. And I want to broaden it, because it is incredibly important gender, but it is diversity. And I'll go back to that personality. If all you hire in your group is all the same personality type, that's very bad for our business. Or all you hire is the same age group, or all you hire is, it's just terrible for the business. So I think you have to mandate that from the top. And I don't think human nature, people talk really nice things, right? But hey, I'm super supportive of the environment, and I want people to have affordable housing, but I just don't want it right next to my house. I think we have to do things, like you have to mandate some things from a leadership position in order for things to get effective.
You bet. I mean, we all come to the table with implicit bias, and acknowledging and recognizing where those biases surface is part of the process of understanding how to bring more inclusion into a setting and a corporate environment. And so, acknowledging that we're not all the same, but we also, each of us comes with different set of those biases and acknowledging and recognizing that those can impair decision making is incredibly important. I think that the reason that leadership sets the tone is because, folks, you're the ones that actually have the power to activate change, and you're the ones who to create that corporate environment and culture that inspires people and gives them a sense of purpose. And so the importance of leadership being involved is way more than just kind of writing on the wall. It's being active and taking actions to ensure that you've got an equitable workforce where voices around those tables are adding to your innovation and your capability. I'd love to make sure that I hear from anyone else on the topic around real tools, experiences that you've had and things that you can share with our listeners today on examples that you've seen of things that work.
Heather, I'd like to answer the question on some real tools that we've used. I like what Darin and Chris said. It starts sometimes as a requirement, and it took us a while as an organization to actually realize that we could be part of the solution, right? We sat as a victim and saying, well, there's not females that are interested in our industry was our first response, right? And then as we put a group to start solving the problem, we all looked the same. And so we thought the same. And so what we had to find ourselves doing was to reach out to the folks that could give us the information. And when we brought those people in face to face, they were uncomfortable to tell us what the issues were. So we did an anonymous survey about 10 years ago. And we got some great information. Now, when you do a survey, you've got to take action on it. And really that has propelled us to start looking, as an organization, to start looking at things differently. You talked about unconscious bias or biases that we have. We did a training with all of our executives, and to a person, everybody walked in and said, I don't have any biases. And then when we got done with the training, we realized that we actually did. And I think my favorite story of that is a group of us were making a decision for an employee to relocate. And we thought we were being really kind because the employee that was the best candidate had just had a baby. And so we thought, well, we're not going to recommend, we're not going to ask the question, we're not going to put her under the pressure. We're just going to make the decision to go with someone else. And because of some of the training that we had, somebody raised their hand and said, why don't we ask? Let's let the employee make that decision. It's not our decision to make. And it's those little things that really have made the big changes for us, because we did go ask that question. And now we've got an advocate about us as an organization that we actually do care, and we want to figure out how to be better. You talked a little bit about sponsorship earlier. And one thing I didn't add in that I wanted to make sure that for the men that listen to this call, sponsorship is not just interacting with a diverse employee. It's also with your male employees to let them know why it's important. It's not mandatory important. Yes, that is the case, but they need to understand the business case, the reason why. And what I've noticed is that, at least with my teams, they do what they see, not what they hear. So they see my actions, and then that's what they repeat. So to me, sponsorship's more than just sponsoring a diverse employee. It's also making sure that I walk the talk.
Thank you, Adam. Anyone else to add before we close out for today?
I think one of the key things is you have to ask. So, simple thing. Hey, what would make a job site better? Well, dedicated female restrooms. Great, easy to do. What would make this better decision? Well, if we could actually have some involvement in the discussion of I just ask the questions. I think that asking, parental leave. What should we be doing on parental leave? Don't make the decision as I'm a 50-year-old white dude. Why am I making the decision on parental leave? I don't understand. I don't understand it. I didn't go through it. So I think if you're not willing to ask, we went through that. We were naming something and had a brand new younger employee, and she, I was like, great. Hey, you want to come in this meeting? We're going to do naming. You can represent a younger generation, because we've got too many old people in this room. I think you've got to be able to ask, and having a culture that does that isn't afraid of it. And it's okay. You don't have to adopt every single thing that comes in, but that's how you're going to learn. And it's that humility of setting aside things to actually be genuinely curious that really creates the environment that people feel comfortable with bringing things up. Wow, they were actually curious. I didn't get in trouble. They wanted to hear my answer. Maybe it got implemented. I think that's a very important component in terms of how to turn this into action, is ask questions. You got to be curious.
And I'd like to add on to that, Chris. You're spot on. As we as leaders, as we have our strategy planning sessions, et cetera, be conscious about the makeup of the people in the room. It doesn't always have to be the same leaders, and you can purposely invite specific individuals, obviously to expand their view, but to get their perspectives and to show others how to listen. It's happened several times in the last few years for me. It's always been rewarding. And for those out there that may be those available to go and suggest it. As a leader, we got 20, 30 things going through our minds every moment. These are ideas that need to be injected. And so advocate for yourself, suggest or petition. Can I sit into the next strategy meeting? I'd love to add some input and see what happens.
Thank you so much. Gentlemen, I want to really just extend my heartfelt appreciation for you sharing your perspectives. Some of the things that I heard today, I think that our listeners are hopefully going to be very inspired. You not only set the tone, as we mentioned, right, but you've given us some really incredible examples from your professional experience on taking risks, of understanding the value of not only asking, but listening, and doing deep evaluations across policies like recruiting, like pay gap analysis. And if anything else, the thing that I take away the most is that you are all putting yourselves in a position to see and teach and do every day. So thank you so much for being advocates and allies. I hope that you will share your experiences broadly and that you will continue this excellent work in our industry. Thank you. For those who want to learn more about diversity, inclusion, and best practices, we do have a best practice guide that is available through iMasons. Simply just type in iMasons best practice diversity and inclusion, and you should find that guide, and it is free to download. Folks, again, I hope you have a great afternoon, and thank you so much for sharing your stories today.